Most of us remember visits a few years ago of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to India and a visit to Israel by Indian Prime Minister Modi. Those were historic visits, given a history of India's boycott of Israel for most of its post-independent history, when it was also a staunch ally of the not so openly anti-Semitic Soviet Union. Do just a search on YouTube with keywords like Jews in India. You'll find many interesting videos there about our people in that country, the history of highly differentiated Jewish communities there, their relationship with the local Hindu, Muslim, and Christian people, contribution to Indian culture, despite their minuscule in size of 0.0000000% of the population, and their significant contribution to Indian trade in spices and opium. You'll also find the almost unanimous claim by Indians and Jews in those videos that there was never anti-Semitism in India. You'll hear that the only reason most of the 30,000 Jews of India left in 1948 and a little bit after the country was the economy and politics, such things as bloody violence during the partition of India between Hindus and Muslims, the creation of the State of Israel, and socialist policies of expropriation by then newly independent of British rule India. Surprisingly to me, in the view of the history of the absence of Jew hatred in that country, I have also found videos predicting a new migration of Jews back to India in the coming future. A very interesting, to say the least, idea given great popularity of Hitler in that country. Let's not forget that swastika, Nazi appropriated traditional Indian symbol. To discuss the issue of anti-Semitism in India, we have invited our old, relatively speaking, friend, Dr. Navras J. Aafreedi. Navras is probably the best person to talk on the subject. He is an assistant professor in Department of History at Presidency University, Calcutta, where he teaches courses in Jewish history, genocide studies, interfaith relations, and minority studies. He is also a research fellow at the Institute of Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, located in New York. Navras, thank you very much for stopping by, and welcome to Chicago Jewish Cafe.
Thanks a lot, Alex. I'm so grateful to you for inviting me to your show. It's always such a privilege to talk to you.
This is our fourth time, and I, as I think told you, without you, I would not even think about looking at India as having anything to do with Jews. It's like another planet, in solar system. It exists, it's big, it's important, but what does it have to do with Jews? Now, and today we're going to talk about something, as I said, to me, very interesting, because it seems like in India, there was never pogroms, there was never Jewish expulsions, there was never bad things happening to Jews. Although, of course, I have to say, the number of Jews in India is so small that, I'm surprised that Indians even notice them. What can you say? What can you say about it?
Well, this is a fact that India and China are the only two such countries in the world where Jews could live in peace and harmony with their non-Jewish neighbors for centuries without experiencing any persecution, without ever directly experiencing any anti-Semitism. But this is one commonality between India and China, of the absence of Jewish persecution. And this is also,
how do you explain it? How do you explain it?
Yeah, I'll come to that. And this is also what distinguishes these two countries from the rest of the world. Now, but along with that, there are a few more things that need to be taken into account. One is that although there was, just as in India, there was no persecution of Jews in China, yet Chinese Jewry lost its separate identity because they assimilated into the general population. This is something that did not happen in India. So unlike the Chinese Jews, the Indian Jews were successful in retaining their separate identity. And what proved to be a blessing in disguise for Jews in India was the Hindu caste system and the endogamous nature of the Hindu caste system. Just as in China, in India too, the most widely practiced religion, Hinduism, is a non-proselytizing faith. In China, it was Confucianism. In India, it was Hinduism. Both these religions are non-proselytizing. So unlike Islam and unlike Christianity, the followers of Hinduism and the followers of Confucianism never desired the Jews living in their midst to convert to these faiths. And they were left in peace. But what did not happen in China and what did happen in India was that in China there was a lot of intermarriage, which did not happen in India because Indian society, and basically the Hindu society, was divided into 4 classes and caste groups, and each caste would marry only within itself. So the question of ever marrying Jews never even crossed the minds of the Hindus there.
So basically you're saying lack of love is a great thing for preservation.
Well, it did help the Jews in retaining their separate identity. Otherwise, it would have been only natural for this tiny, minuscule religious minority to assimilate into this non-Jewish sea of humanity that India is. India is the second most populous country in the world. So this certainly did help the Indian Jews retain their separate identity. And this is one thing. Now, the fact, this is an undisputed fact of history, that Jews in India were never persecuted. Just as in China, they were never persecuted. In the rest of the world, they were, wherever they were. But this has also strengthened the narrative of the absence of anti-Semitism, which is not true. The fact is the Jews in India were never persecuted in spite of the presence of anti-Semitism in the country. But the fact that there was never any violence against Jews, they were never troubled for being Jews in any manner, has kind of made the people not take notice of this anti-Semitism. This is what helped this anti-Semitism to go unnoticed in the country. And not only this absence of anti-Semitism, the narrative of the absence of anti-Semitism has even been embraced by the Indian Jews themselves. If you ask an Indian Jew if they ever experienced anti-Semitism in India, they would say no, they never experienced any anti-Semitism, and they would not be bluffing, they would not be lying when they say so. Because in spite of the presence of anti-Semitism in India, it was an anti-Semitism that was never experienced directly by the Jews resident there. Why is it so? Because this anti-Semitism was usually casual in nature and purely rhetorical. It rarely converted into violence. It rarely translated into violence. One more thing. And the people who indulged in this rhetorical anti-Semitism were geographically located far away from the locations of the Jewish communities in India. Hence, the Jews living in India never ever had any direct experience of even this non-violent rhetorical anti-Semitism. That is why I say that when an Indian Jew says that there has never been any anti-Semitism that he experienced or she experienced, the person is telling you the truth. The person is not lying. Point one. Point two is that the reason why the Indian Jews themselves have embraced the narrative of the absence of anti-Semitism also has to do with the pressures of self-preservation that religious minorities often experience. For instance, you will come across videos on YouTube containing interviews of Jews in Iran who would say that, no, there is no discrimination against us. There is no persecution of us in Iran. What do you expect a Jew living in Iran to say? So
this is the best country in the world that he can imagine himself living in.
Exactly. Same would be the case with Hindus in Pakistan. There are interviews of Hindus in Pakistan who say that, no, we have no problem here. We are very happy with our life here in Pakistan. But we all know this is not true. As far as the Jews are concerned, every single Jew in India lives with the fear of being killed because of mistaken identity. Every Jew knows that if at least every Jewish man in India knows that if he is ever caught in a Hindu-Muslim conflict, on the street, then he risks being mistaken for a Muslim because of the missing foreskin of his penis, and he can be killed for that, because there would be no way for that Jewish man to explain.
Are you saying that in such you call it conflict, I call it just evil deed, killing somebody that that you can kill because there's many of you and there's few of them? Are you saying that they will take the pants off first in order to make sure that this is a Muslim and not Hindu?
Exactly. This is what happens.
Wow.
Whenever there are communal rights, this is what happens. This is how people's communal identity is determined. This is how people are identified. They either ask for identification documents, photo ID documents, and if the mob isn't satisfied with the documents provided by the target, then they generally pull down the person's pants. And given the small numbers of Jews, most of the Indians don't know who the Jews are. So it is quite understandable that every Jewish man knows that if he ever is caught in such a conflict, if he ever finds himself surrounded by a mob, it would not be possible for that person, for the Jewish man, to explain to the mob that he is not a Muslim, but Jewish. And Jews too circumcise just as Muslims do.
If they're so afraid of it, then why do they live in the neighborhoods that populated largely by Muslims?
Because they have never had any problems with their Muslim neighbors.
Did
In
they
fact,
have problems with Hindus?
they have never had any problems with Hindus too. As I said, if the Jews in India are attacked, they are never attacked for being Jewish.
I
There
understand.
have been
If I'd be a Jew in India, I'd say, okay, if this is the major point of concern for me, I'm going to move in the neighborhood outside of Muslim neighborhood. So if there's going to be any problems there, I'm not going to be affected by it.
I don't think as a Jew, your life would be very easy living with Hindu neighbors. I think it would be easier to live with Muslim neighbors because of the commonality of dietary habits.
Mhm.
Both Jews and Muslims abstain from the consumption of pork. Both eat non-vegetarian food. Both are
like beef, like a cow, yeah?
Jews, the Bani Israel community living in India, thanks for bringing this up. We all know that people in India have been lynched in a number of cases just on the mere suspicion of the consumption of beef, or even on the mere suspicion of transporting beef from one location to another. Simply on the suspicion that there have been cases, a number of cases when people have been lynched. So you can very well imagine that Jews living in India had the sense of not consuming beef so as to protect themselves, conscious as they were of their small numbers. So this doesn't speak very well of the alleged in Hindu tolerance towards religious minorities. If they really had been tolerant, then the Jews wouldn't have any hesitation in consuming beef, which they do everywhere else in the world.
Are you saying that if my Jewish family, for example, would be sitting in gazebo in front of my house, eating beefsteak in a Hindu neighborhood, we would have problems?
Obviously, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Absolutely.
This reminds me of what is written in Torah about problems of Jews had in ancient Egypt, because ancient Egyptians venerated the god in a form of ram, and Jews were eating sheeps. We were a pastoral people. So now I've seen some of those lynchings of Muslims, truck drivers, that were transporting, cows. I have to say, to me, this is just absolutely impossible to believe. This is, but on the other hand, those people venerate cows as gods or whatever, as incarnation of gods, and etc. And this is where I'm coming. So you say that there's no anti-Semitism. Indians say that there's no anti-Semitism, but they hate Muslims, and they have, as I understand now, developed special aversion to Christians because of supposedly of proselytism, of conversion to Christianity. But don't they know, Hindus, don't they know, and I understand that anti-Semitism, to a large extent, I understand it from you, from your speaking and writing, especially presentation at about that anti-Semitism among Indian Muslims is very strong. Some of the leading anti-Semites and Muslim leaders, come from Indian Muslim community. So this is a sort of an interesting combination. But my question is this: if Hindus who are hostile to Indian Muslims and Christians, don't they say to themselves, just 1 second, there's 200 million Muslims, there's only 30,000 or 5,000 Jews. It's easier for us to kill 5,000 Jews. they are the cause that there's Muslims to start with. Why do we hate Muslims or Christians when the source of their religion are the Jews?
They don't know enough about Abrahamic religions to be aware that of the three Abrahamic religions, Judaism is the oldest. They don't know about that. They're not aware of this. Point one. Point two, they would never want to harm Jews for being Jewish. Why? Because Jews are considered and are projected as a model minority in India. What makes them a model minority are the following factors: their numerical insignificance, their being apolitical, and their being absolutely undemanding. They're being absolutely submissive. So these are considered to be the qualities of a model minority, which the Indian Jews are seen to be possessing.
But the Jews in India are submissive. I guess they don't talk to their Hindu neighbors saying, look at this, your Shiva and this and this and this and this God and this God. They're not really gods. What are you talking about? Do they talk to Hindus that way?
Never, never. They are respectful to Hindus and to their faith, just as all minorities in India are, and they should all be. We should all be respectful to each other's faith.
As communities and maybe as individuals. Maybe
yes, both ways, both ways.
But I'll tell you this, a person with my personality talking to a Hindu and talking about, you know, the idea of the world and God, if we do talk about it, because I would not impose myself on him and start talking about these things that is not part of who I am. But if we did start talk about something like this, I would not be hiding. I would not be saying, you know, look at this. You have this for 5,000 years religion, you know, the whole world worshipped idols, you know, throughout human history. There's nothing special about you. What is special is my religion that comes from one guy somewhere there in, no?
No. I think it has in fact been wise on the part of Jews to never talk on these lines, and this is what has made the Jews such a loved religious minority in India. What is interesting is that there is philo-Semitism as well as anti-Semitism both in India. Both these coexist. Philo-Semitism and anti-Semitism coexist in India. In fact, not just philo-Semitism, it is philo-Zionism. Judaism and Jews are also appreciated for being absolutely non-proselytizing, which is what the basic problem is with Christians, because they are seen as a proselytizing people. So are the Muslims. Muslims are seen as a proselytizing community. They are a proselytizing community, no doubt. Both Islam and Christianity are proselytizing religions, unlike Judaism. So Judaism is different. They are aware of this. So Judaism is different from Islam and Christianity, given the fact that it is a non-proselytizing religion. And what makes the Jews a model minority, as I mentioned to you, is their numerical insignificance, their being apolitical, their being submissive, their being absolutely undemanding. These are the qualities that make the Jews a model minority. I don't think Jews would have had the same, they would have experienced the same tolerance as they did had they been numerically stronger than what they are, had they been more assertive about their political rights. I doubt if they would have experienced the same degree of minority, of tolerance, sorry, as Professor Amartya Sen, Nobel Prize winner for economics and also a philosopher, once said that the principle involved in this has been that of swikriti, acceptance, rather than that of equity. So equity is something that is elusive in Indian society, obsessed as it is with hierarchy. We have classes in a vertical structure, and we have also caste groups, all in a vertical structure, one upon the other. So, and Indian Jewry has been represented by different groups. Traditionally, three communities, the most numerous of them being the Bene Israel, who were almost at the lowest rungs of the social hierarchy. And in India, in Hindu society, the word for foreigner is malech, that is impure. That is the term for foreigners, malech. They do not fall in the class system. They are out of the class system. They fall out of the caste system and class system, and they are merely tolerated. That's it. So that is what the case has been. Now, another thing that should be taken into account is that I was telling you about the divisions of Indian Jewry. Bene Israel, the most numerous, Kochini, the best known, settled in Cochin in Kerala, and Baghdadis, that is Middle Eastern Jews, who were the last to settle in India. They came between the decades of 1790s and 1830s and settled primarily in the metropolitan cities of Bombay and Calcutta. Other than these three communities, there are new Jews that have emerged in the country as a result of Judaizing movements that came into existence in Northeast India and South India. In Northeast India, it was the Bene Menashe movement. In South India, there are two movements, Bene Ephraim movement and a movement that has emerged among a community called Chettiar, in a section of that community called Chettiar. So these are Judaizing movements. Now, of these groups, the Bene Israel, which lived in the countryside prior to the advent of the British, were oil pressers. But once the British arrived, they took to English language education, they learned the English language, and thus this is what made them employable in the civil services and in the military services. And this is what transformed the community from a rural community into an urban community. But prior to the arrival of the British, when they were resident in countryside Maharashtra for centuries, interestingly, the Bene Israel never referred to themselves with the word Yahudi, which is Hindi, Urdu, and Marathi for Jewish. They refrained from ever describing themselves as Yahudi, that is Jewish. Instead, they preferred to call themselves Bene Israel because they understood that there are two terms that have been used in the Islamic scriptures. One is the Arabic variant of the Hebrew, Bnei Israel. The Hebrew is Bnei Israel. In Arabic, it becomes Bani Israel. So this is one term, Bani Israel, and the other term is Yahud or Yahudi. And they were aware of the presence of polemics against Yahud or Yahudi in the Islamic scriptures. So they feared that they could be the targets of Muslim anti-Semitism if it became known to the Muslim rulers who were ruling different parts of the country, the principalities, and also who were the rulers at the capital city, Delhi, that they were Jewish. Hence, they prefer to call themselves Bani Israel, which simply means descendants of the biblical character Jacob, which does not necessarily mean that they are Jewish.
Well, in my mind, when somebody says, I am Ben Israel, I consider him a Jew, providing, that he accepts, the foundational elements.
Yes. But this is the understanding that was at work in their refraining from identifying themselves as Yahudim and instead calling themselves Bene Israel. They call themselves Bene Israel. This is the pronunciation that they did of the Hebrew Bnei Israel. It became in Marathi, the locally spoken language Marathi, its variant emerges as Bene Israel, which became the community's name.
Well, it's sort of like American Jews at the end of 19th century were calling themselves Hebrews, or preferred, especially Reformed Jews, preferred to refer to themselves Hebrew congregation, Hebrew Union College, not Jewish college, etc. to this day. But hiding. Now, hiding one's identity, or not hiding, but at least making it less visible. To my mind, this is one of the biggest indications of anti-Semitism, a profound anti-Semitism in a given society. If I have to hide who I am.
Yes, certainly. I think this has to do with the fact that Muslims were in control, and they feared that there could be repercussions from them if the Muslim rulers of that region came to know of the existence of these Jews. But
so this is basically
another interesting thing is that in spite of this fear, we know that they were employed by Muslim rulers too. For instance, they rose to high ranks in the army of the Siddis of Janjira. Siddis were a ruling dynasty of Abyssinian Black African origin that ruled over this island of Janjira and built a kingdom for themselves. And their territory, the territory that the Bene Israel inhabited, fell within the limits of this kingdom. It was within the boundaries of this kingdom of Janjira, ruled by these Black Abyssinian Muslim slave traders, the Siddis.
Well, the fact that Jews have been used widely by anti-Semites and anti-Semitic societies and cultures is nothing new about that. But my question to you is, because for me, when they talk about this ambassador of Israel to India talks about constantly that this is one of the greatest, you mentioned, one of the greatest things that there's no anti-Semitism. And then you tell me that the Jews are better off hiding the fact that they're Jewish in this case, in that case, in this way, in this way. Now, to me, it does not sound like a Jew welcoming society.
The fact is that if there is intolerance for any one minority group, even if the other minority groups are tolerated, that does not make that society a liberal society.
Well, I'm not about liberal, because, for example, does Muslim hide the fact that he is Muslim in India?
No, they don't.
They don't, but Jews do.
Well, in individual cases, Muslims do hide when they notice that their religious identity could be detrimental to their business interests. So there are occasions when Muslims try to project themselves as non-Muslim. This happens in individual cases, but not on a mass level.
But with Jews, it is on a mass level.
Not anymore. I'm talking of history. Now, I'm talking in the sense
when
that...
When did it change?
It changed with the arrival of the British. With the arrival of the British also brought about a sense of security. And this also explains why when the British left, most of the Jews too left the country. The Jews left the country. Had it been only for the land of Israel, then all of them would have gone only to Israel. But there were a large number of the Jews who went to the UK and to North America as well, because they were not sure if they would enjoy the same protection in independent India as they enjoyed under the British.
Was there any resentment on the part of Hindus to toward the Jews.
And one more thing before you ask me your next question. And one more thing, when India got her independence in 1947, it coincided with the partition of the country, and there was terrible violence at that time. Hindus butchering Muslims and Muslims butchering Hindus. The number of people murdered is estimated to be somewhere between 1 to 2 million, and 10 million people became homeless. So you can imagine what this tiny religious minority must have felt, how frightening it must have been for the Jews living in India. They must have thought that if they are ever mistaken for Muslims, what would happen to them? So we also have to take this into account. And there are a number of Indian Jewish writers who have written about this Indian Jewish fear of being attacked and killed because of being mistaken for Muslims. And those writers are Esther David, Robin David, Sadia Shepherd. They've all written about this in their books.
So basically, you're saying the hostility from Indians toward Jews could be only as a result of them being mistaken for Muslim.
Yes, the hostility would come entirely because of that.
Not separately from it, right?
Yes, but you see, the manifestation of Hindu anti-Semitism, this is not the only manifestation of Hindu anti-Semitism, if we can call it anti-Semitism. There are other forms too. For instance, the Hindu nationalists indulge in a competitive victimhood, which amounts to the trivialization of the Holocaust. The Hindu nationalists do not say, unlike the Muslims, that the Holocaust never happened, or they never try to minimize its scale and magnitude. They acknowledge the fact that there were 6 million Jews murdered during the Holocaust. All that they say is that it is not correct to consider the Holocaust to be the biggest genocide ever in human history, because the genocide that the Hindus experienced was of a much greater scale and magnitude. It spanned several centuries, and the estimates of Hindus murdered by Muslims that they put, those range from 75 million to 536 million. This is the huge range of the estimates put by them. Now, according to the different forms of anti-Semitism that have been identified by scholars, this obfuscation of the Holocaust and this indulgence in competitive victimhood certainly amounts to Holocaust trivialization, which is undoubtedly a form of anti-Semitism.
When they talk about this 500 million people, I did not know that in India until recently there was a 500 million people, but I guess, they could say, well, that's the reason there was no 500 million people, because they were all murdered.
Exactly. They have nothing. They have absolutely nothing to support these claims of theirs in terms of historical evidence.
And that
I'm not saying, and mind you, I'm not saying that the Muslim rulers of India were very tolerant and that they never persecuted the Hindu subjects. This is not what I am saying. But this is an insane exaggeration of things.
And I'm sure that Mughals or whoever followed them, when killing Hindu, would say, do you want to recognize Muhammad as the great prophet? If you do, you live. If you don't, you die.
I don't think Islam was spread in India in this manner, because had Islam been spread in India entirely by force, then majority of the people in India would have been Muslims by now.
I did not mean to say that they came, and forced Indians to become Muslims, but I'm saying that this was part of the process of conversion.
Yes, of course. Well, there are numerous instances of conversion to Islam by force, but producing a narrative that Islam was spread in the Indian subcontinent entirely by force would not be correct.
Right.
Because if you look at the spread of Islam in the Indian subcontinent, then the Muslim majority areas happen to be the two wings of the Indian subcontinent: the western wing, which is now Pakistan, and the eastern wing, which is now Bangladesh. And between the two, most of the country is predominantly Hindu, predominantly non-Muslim. That is where the seat of the government was. So had there been forced conversions, it would have only been natural for most of the Muslims to be right under the nose of the ruler. But this never happened. It's the marginal sections of society that were the first to convert to Islam. But that is not what we are discussing right now. So we are talking of the varied manifestations of anti-Semitism in India. Now, another manifestation of anti-Semitism from the majority Hindus can be seen in the immense popularity that Hitler enjoys. If you go to Facebook, you will find a number of Facebook accounts of people who have Hitler for their first name. Of course, this is not a name that was given to them by their parents. Hitler is yet to achieve this kind of popularity as for the children to be named after him. No, I haven't yet. There certainly are a few individuals in India who became known because they became popular in politics or in bureaucracy, who happen to have the first name Hitler. But Hitler is still not a common first name in India. But there certainly are a number of people who create their Facebook accounts with this fake first name Hitler, and they suffix it with their surname, Singh or Khan, both Hindus and Muslims. So this is just one of the many indications of how popular Hitler is. Then Hitler's autobiography, Mein Kampf, its sale has more than doubled in the last 2 decades. Hitler memorabilia sell like hotcakes. Now, this has to do with a number of things. First is there is this delusion that Hitler contributed to India's struggle for independence by weakening the British, and also perhaps by extending military assistance to a militant Indian leader, that is a leader who made an attempt to liberate India from the British rule through military action. That is Subhash Chandra Bose, who raised an army which was manned by Indian prisoners of war of the British Army. And these prisoners of war, these 4 soldiers had been taken prisoners by the Germans, and the Germans permitted them to join the Indian National Army that was raised by Subhash Chandra Bose.
Didn't Germans also infuse them with a little bit of Jew hatred?
Not them, but we are aware of this. There is an Italian scholar who has researched this subject as to how Nazis did try to spread their propaganda in India as well. And they had separate sets of literature for Hindus and Muslims. They did try to influence both Hindus and Muslims. And they were successful to some degree. So when we try to study why Hitler is popular, these are some of the things that come to the fore. Another thing is that there is a very strong craving for strong leadership. In a survey, it has been found of all the people in the world, one country where people are most in favor of autocracy is India,
Despite the fact that India is democracy.
despite the fact that India is democracy.
So democracy actually drives Indians to the idea that they really would prefer to have somebody ruling them instead of electing that person.
Yeah, it was a global survey. There were a number of countries that were surveyed, and the highest number of people favoring autocracy, such people were found in India.
But it's very interesting, you know, given that they like Hitler, at least not all, but whoever it is, you know, like Hitler as an example of dictator that they prefer.
Yes,
Why not Genghis Khan?
I'll tell you why not. Admiration for Hitler in particular and the National Socialist Nazis that he led, it is mediated by the Hindu nationalist attitude towards Muslims in India. You have to understand that for them, Holocaust is a model to emulate.
But just a second, 6 million is 6 million. Also, it's Jews. Let's remember, it's not 200 million Muslims with another 200 million across the border with nuclear weapons. So how
Yes.
do they think that they can emulate Holocaust? Holocaust can be emulated only when you take people who are unarmed, who think that they like you, and then murder them, especially if it's women, children, and elderly.
Well, they don't think that they would need an army for that. They recently, just a few months ago, there several calls have been made for genocidal violence against Muslims in India, and inspiring each Hindu to kill at least 2 Muslims. So
Each Hindu, just one second, there's a billion Hindus, 200 Muslims. Each Hindu, where they're going to find another 5,000, 5 million Muslims in India?
yes, exactly. So even if a fraction of the Hindu population gets inspired to do their work, they would achieve their aim and objective.
But Muslims are not going to just let them kill themselves. They're going to fight back.
Of course. Well, we aren't we deviating from our discussion?
Yes, we are. But I have to tell you this, that this is part of it, because in my mind, the fact that Jews in India have to be submissive in a particular way, not openly declare themselves who they are. Muslims can, Jews can. There's another problem for me, the way I see it. You know, in my mind, and you may correct me, anti-Semitism is a result of competing for the inheritance of Abraham. That is, who is the real heir of Abraham? And that's where the real anti-Semitism comes from. Indians do not compete for the heritage of Abraham, and that is why they leave the Jews alone.
Yes.
Chinese don't compete for the heritage of Jews, of Abraham, and that is why. But both Christians and Muslims do compete with Jews for the heritage, and that's why they kill and murder the Jews when they can, or when situation comes up.
I don't think there ever would be any attacks on Jews for their being Jewish. There have been attacks on Jews in the past whenever they have been mistaken for being Muslims.
I understand it. I do not. I understand this point.
Yes, and whenever there have been occasions when Jews have been targeted for being Jewish, but those attacks have been perpetrated not by Hindus but by Muslims.
Well,
and interestingly, whenever such attacks have been perpetrated by Muslims, those Muslims have not been the local Muslims or their Muslim neighbors, because the Jews, wherever they are in India, they enjoy superbly cordial relations with their Muslims. In fact, all synagogues in India, almost all synagogues in India, are looked after by Muslims. all Jewish cemeteries are looked after by Muslims. The only engraver of Jewish tombstones in the state of Maharashtra is a Muslim. The best known Hebrew calligrapher from India is a Muslim. And
are you saying that as a calligrapher, he's also doing Torah scrolls?
Exactly. He's Tawfiq Zakaria. He is also a chef, and he is currently in Dubai. Should you ever like to interview him, I would be very happy to put you in touch with him.
That would be very interesting, because my understanding was that actually non-Jew could not do Torah scrolls.
Well, he has done, as I understand.
Okay.
To the best of my knowledge, he has done, and he was even invited to Israel, and he met President Rivlin, the president of Israel. He has photographs with him on.
Well, I'm very happy to hear, that Muslims and Jews live at least in that place in India well. But of course, you yourself indicated that the anti-Semitism among Muslims, including Muslims of India, has both the everyday expression, but also ideological, theological.
Yes, well, exactly. You see, the word Yehudi has attained a pejorative connotation among sections of South Asian Muslims. Whenever a person intends to inflict insult on somebody and sees that person either as greedy or a miser or a betrayer, he would call that person Yehudi. You see, so it has come to attain a pejorative connotation. Now, as far as the ideological Islamist anti-Semitism is concerned, the scholars who study Islamist or jihadist anti-Semitism have generally focused only on the Middle East. And they have almost entirely overlooked this huge region of South Asia, without realizing that South Asia is home to 1/3 of the world's Muslim population. And some of the most prominent Islamist ideologues were born in India and Pakistan.
What about Indonesia?
I'm in no position to comment on Indonesia. I haven't studied Indonesia. Indonesia certainly is the most populous Muslim country in the world. But after Indonesia, the second most populous Muslim country is Pakistan, and the third largest Muslim population lives in India. Now, we are all aware of this organization in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay, established by Hassan al-Banna, whose most prominent adumbrator was Sayyid Qutb. Sayyid Qutb popularized the concept.
One of the branch of this Islamic Brotherhood now is in control of who is Prime Minister of Israel.
Oh, I am not aware of that. I'm not aware of that. I have to admit my ignorance. But
I'm saying Muhammad, whatever it is, if he leaves the coalition, the Bennett is kaput.
Alex, I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
But let me complete what I was telling you, otherwise I'll forget.
Okay.
So Sayyid Qutb popularized the revival of the concept of Jahiliyyah, that is the age of ignorance. Now, it wasn't his original concept of the revival of Jahiliyyah. The person who wrote about it for the first time was an Indian Muslim scholar born in India who later settled in Pakistan. His name was Maulana Sayyid Abul Ala Maududi. Maududi's Urdu writings were translated into Arabic by an Islamic scholar who hailed from my hometown, Lucknow. His name was Maulana Abul Hasan Ali Hasni Nadwi. And those Arabic translations were read by Sayyid Qutb, and those translations inspired him to popularize this concept of the revival of Jahiliyyah, that is the age of ignorance, which led to the mutation and to the proliferation of Islamist militancy across the world. This is what happened.
Why
And
a Muslim from India?
anti-Semitism. One more thing. Anti-Semitism is something that is the very essence of Islamism. It is intertwined with Islamism. There is no Islamism. There is no Islamism without anti-Semitism. Because
why the guy in 18th century India can develop this idea, this ideology with the center point of hatred of Jews? Why?
Maududi did not belong to the 18th century. He belonged to the 20th century.
Maududi, yeah, but the origin was at the end of 18th century. Also the guy from
Shah Wali Allah. He is considered among the main ideologues of pan-Islamism. Now, this has to do, it has its roots in the overly literal interpretation or misinterpretation of the scriptural polemics in Islam. Scholars are of the view that these polemics, such as these, are not peculiar to Islam. There are polemics also in the Jewish scriptures. There are polemics also in Christian scriptures. Whenever we come across any polemic, we must try to see if there are any metaphors involved. Point one. Point two, if we aren't able to find any metaphors, we must try to juxtapose that polemic with something positive against whom that polemic is from the same text. So you would have polemic about a people, and about the same people you will have something positive from the same scripture. So this is what should be done. But the fact is that people try to interpret these polemics in an overly literal manner, which amounts to their misinterpretation.
I understand it, but this has been the case with Islam and Christianity, with all competing with Jews' religion, you know, from the day one of their establishment. By the way, you know, if any Muslim wants to take a look at the same Quran, depending on how you interpret it, you can see very clearly, you know, that God, after having taken Jews out of Egypt, had to have some place to which he would lead them, and that was the promised land in Quran. So basically, anybody who denies the Jews of Bnei Israel, you know, as it says there, the place in what we call land of Israel, what Muslims call Palestine, the place against Quran, against Muhammad, against Muslims. You know, this is just very simple. So anybody can interpret any way they want, particular book or particular idea. But my question to you is, why in India? I mean, I understand this Muslim Brotherhood. In fact, any attempt, and in my mind, this is the same dynamic that plays among Muslims, Hindus, Jews, Germans of early 20th century, Hitler. That is an attempt to unite the basic communities within the borderline that they established for themselves. Germans are Germans, you know, Jews are Jews, Hindus are Hindus, Muslims are Muslims, and to find some common enemy in order to whip up the identity or create an identity that can be used in order to have some active promotion of. I mean, the way I see it, the Hindus, this RSS, big organization now, right? I mean, Modi is part of that organization, but the founder of that organization, as I understand, was reading Urus's novel Exodus when he was in jail. That was the only book that he had because he felt that was his guide to action.
Yeah, if you will remember, I said that philo-Semitism or philo-Zionism coexists with anti-Semitism in the Hindu nationalist rhetoric. The Hindus see the Zionists and the state of Israel as a natural ally against Muslims who they perceive as the common adversary, as the common foe, as the common enemy. That's point one. And Hindu nationalists also draw inspiration from the Zionist revival of the Hebrew language in our times as a spoken language. They would like to do the same with the ancient language Sanskrit, which, just like Hebrew,
but I think they fail in that area completely. I mean,
yes. Just as Hebrew was largely confined for liturgical purposes for hundreds of years, the same is the case with the Sanskrit language. It is mostly confined for liturgical purpose.
But how can it be that the guy who finds inspiration in Jews coming out after this horrible ordeal of Second World War and Holocaust, and at the same time seeing Hitler as a great leader? How do they reconcile this?
This is reconciled by the fact that when they admired Hitler and Nazis and his anti-Semitism, it wasn't because of any hatred for Jews. It was because of how they perceived this as what a nation should do to the minorities there, to the religious minorities. This is what should be done to religious minorities if they are not submissive enough.
Mm-hmm. But this is the same. This is hatred to Jews. And when you say submissive minority that is not submissive, first of all, Jews in Germany were highly submissive. There was no greater goal for Jews in Germany than to become real Germans, assimilate.
Yes.
And
it's. I can only try to fathom why there was this admiration for Hitler and Nazis and their National Socialism. And it clearly has to do with the Hindu nationalist attitude towards Muslims in India. It does not emanate out of any hatred for Jews in the country. But you see, the numerical insignificance of Jews has also kind of proved to be a blessing for them. Because of this numerical insignificance of theirs, the Jews were never perceived as a threat to the majority. Point one. Point two, in the case of Muslims in India, there is this factor of the sense of majority victimhood. Whether it is supported by historical evidence or not, that is a different thing. We know that there is hardly anything which they could present in terms of historical evidence to support their claims. In spite of this lack of historical evidence, the sense of majority victimhood is strong, and it is out of this sense of majority victimhood that emanates calls for retributive violence against the Muslim adversary. And in these calls for retributive violence against Muslims, what Hitler did to the Jews and what his allies, the Nazis, did to the Jews emerges as a model to emulate, as a source of inspiration. Point one. Now, Israel too is a source of inspiration and a model, given how the state of of Israel is admired for what is perceived by the Hindu nationalists, its high-handedness in dealing with any aggression against her and in combating Islamist terrorism.
So now this is very interesting, and I wanted to finish with the other question, but I'm going to ask you this question because basically you say that the admiration for Hitler comes out of their desire, Hindus' desire. By the way, is there a difference between Hindu religion and Hindu ethnic group?
I don't think it would be fair to brand, to label all Hindus as Hindu nationalists, because non-violence too is a very prominent feature of what we know as Hinduism. What the Hindu nationalists try to do is to project the aggressive elements of the Hindu philosophy, and they try to abuse those features to their advantage.
Mm-hmm. So I understand that, but the question.
So to put it briefly, not all Hindus can be called Hindu nationalists.
I'm not talking about right now. My question was not about ideology. My question was if Hindus, that is followers of particular religion or religions in India,
yes,
identify or divide in their own mind the moment of religion with the moment of their ethnic origin. Because, for example, Jews do not divide the difference. There's no difference between Jew as a religion and Jew as the ethnic belonging to a particular ethnic group or national group, the way we see it.
Honestly speaking, there is no clarity on this, because as you rightly said, that there is no clear distinction. Even in the case of Jews, there have been multiple definitions of who a Jew is, of how Jew should be defined. Same has been the case with Hindus. It was only during the 1901 census of India, when it was made mandatory for people to identify with a particular religion, that people started identifying themselves as Hindu. Prior to that, Hindus had always identified themselves with different strands of what we know as Hinduism, whether they were Shaivites or Vaishnavites or this or that. So this
and if one of those followers of those gods became atheist, what would he be then?
Even then, yes, then you're right in asking this. Even then, the person would not cease to be Hindu. He would be a Hindu atheist.
He would have a problem, you know.
Yes, yes. Well, it is for this reason that it is said that Hinduism is not merely a religion. Hinduism is basically a way of life, a philosophy. And then there are scholars who say that Hinduism is actually an umbrella term for a variety of faiths, for a plurality of faiths and beliefs that have all been covered under the term Hinduism. Those who did not fall in the category of any of the Abrahamic religious communities were all grouped together as Hindus.
So, and my last question, we're running out of time, but I want to ask this question because I found on YouTube videos some of the expressions of tremendous love for India, for Indian people, for Indian culture, and a part of Jews, especially in Israel, after many young people traveled to India after serving in the army. And I was surprised that some even expressed the idea that India may be future promised land for Jews, because things are falling apart in Europe, for Jews, not going well. In the United States, it could also be a problem. So people are looking toward the East, India, China, which seem to be countries without history of anti-Semitism. And some of the people, I'm sorry, I'm not one of them, but I just want to ask you this question, see those countries as possibly the promised land of the future for Jews. What do you say?
I think this is too utopian.
Too utopian. And I say that this is, in my mind, this is very problematic because, as I said, Indians and Chinese are not anti-Semites, that is active anti-Semites, only because they, to this point, have not competed yet with Jews for the heritage of Abraham. If something will happen, I do not know, maybe it's happening because in India, Judaism, for some reason other than whereas Mumbai, I do not know what province is that, is not even recognized as a religion. And the same thing in China. Judaism is not recognized officially as a religion. So there's problems with Judaism among official Chinese and Indian thinking.
Well, I won't say that Judaism has not been recognized. It's just that Jews did not enjoy the status of a religious minority in India until 2017. It was the first state to declare, the first two states to declare, and perhaps the only two states in India to declare Jews, to recognize Jews as religious minority, were the Western
but it's
states
only recently
of Gujarat and Maharashtra, and this recognition of Jews as a religious minority coincided with it happened around the time when Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Israel.
Yes, and the same
around that time in 2017.
And the same thing in China. It seems like there's no anti-Semitism in China, but when we have tried to publish Chinese translation of Hebrew Bible, the scholars in China treated us like leopards. They were afraid to touch it. Despite the fact that there is Chinese Christian translations of Bible in Chinese, and they distributed whatever. But when Hebrew together with Chinese was mentioned for the remainders of Chinese Jews, those Jews were scared to touch it, and all the Christian, Bible scholars in China were afraid to touch it. And that is, in China to this day, Judaism is not recognized officially as a religion. That in Shanghai, there's a long history, and there's even synagogues now, like in India and Mumbai and other places. But so when we talk about lack of anti-Semitism, it depends on what exactly we're talking about.
But there is a caveat here. There is a qualifier here that must be added. There are various estimates of the Jewish population in India. The estimates vary from 3,000 to 10,000. There are reasons why there is this diversity in estimates, but the most reliable of these estimates is that of 5,000. 80% of the Indian Jews are concentrated in and around Mumbai. So there were enough Jews in the state of Maharashtra, whose capital is Mumbai, where they came to be recognized as a religious minority. There are a couple of hundred Jews, or perhaps slightly less than that, in the state of Gujarat. Most of them concentrated in the city of Ahmedabad. Now, I live in Kolkata, which is the capital city of the state of West Bengal. In this state, all the Jews are concentrated in Kolkata, and their number is estimated to be just 20 individuals. Now, a group of 20 individuals just cannot qualify as a community.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I do not know what exactly those laws do for that community in Mumbai. You know, recognize this.
It does with the status, with the recognition of a community's minority. When a community is recognized as a minority, it does bring them a certain degree of benefits because of the state's policy of affirmative action and the state's policy of safeguarding minority interests. Because after all, constitutionally speaking, India is still a secular republic, a secular democratic country with equal rights of all religious communities. Constitutionally speaking,
very interesting. Russia of Putin is also secular republic with all rights. And I'm not, look at this, it's much better than Soviet Union was, but we're talking about
yes,
a little bit different things, despite the fact that we're using the same words.
yes.
In any case, Navras, as always, it's a great pleasure, and I have learned a lot by talking to you. This gives me some better idea about India, which is the second largest country in the world, and the world the Jews, that is my people, live in, because India is a big factor. Thank you very much. And I hope that we're going to talk again about, because it seems like India and specifically your specialty in Judaica, various elements of it, is going to be in greater and greater demand.
Thank you very much, Alex, for having me on your show. It's always such a pleasure and a privilege to talk with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You have a great day.
You too. Bye.